Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to COVID-19 Fraud and Chargeback Prevention. This is a joint presentation between Chargeback Gurus and SIFT. The presentation will be recorded and available afterwards. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just submit them through the platform and we'll address as many as we can at the end. Over the last several months, we've received a fairly astonishing number of questions related to the changes in the payments ecosystem caused by COVID-19. It's something that everyone from SMBs to enterprise companies are working to better understand how they can pull their company through the pandemic. So we felt that this would be an important issue for us to cover today, and we hope to shed some light on the situation overall. That being said, I'm going to introduce you to your speakers. We have Suresh Dakshina. He's our president and co-founder here at Chargeback Gurus. As a certified e-commerce fraud prevention specialist, certified payments professional, and certified chargeback management professional, he spent more than a decade providing chargeback and fraud minimization consultation to Fortune 500 companies. He also works closely with the major card networks to develop chargeback process optimization and compelling evidence policies. We also have Jeff Sakasagawa of SIFT joining us. Jeff is the trust and safety architect for SIFT. He's spent over 10 years fighting fraud for Google, Facebook, and Square. In addition, his last 2 years at Square were spent managing teams covering BSA/AML reviews, quality assurance, identity verification, and a host of other compliance-related matters. He has a passion for cross-functional and scalable solutions that delight as opposed to simply deliver. That being said, how has COVID shaped the fraud landscape? Suresh, why don't we start with you since you seem to know about the card network policies.
Sure. Thank you, Tyler. The card networks are fully aware of the COVID-19 situation. They are closely monitoring all the fraud disputes as well as the consumer disputes that are happening. And they realize that it's inevitable for certain industries to actually, have a low chargeback volume, 90 basis points. So they know that it's going to be actually more than that. So what they did was with Visa, they stopped the monitoring program for travel and entertainment merchants. So because some of the travel merchants have seen up to 50% chargeback spike, they have exceeded 2 to 3% chargebacks based on our internal records. And we have reported this to Visa as well. And Visa has stopped the monitoring program until July. We anticipate that they might actually extend this, beyond July if the situation continues. But it looks like the fraud percentage is slowly declining, but it's not to the level where we want to be at. So if this continues, that we can see an extension on the dispute monitoring program from Visa. On the MasterCard side, they stopped the monitoring program for 4 to 6 months across all industries. They didn't segregate the travel and entertainment, but they have done across all the industries, which is great because not just travel and entertainment, we also have other industries which are severely affected, like gaming industries. They have been severely affected by that as well. With American Express, they made few policy changes, which I absolutely love. They extend the time frame that they normally provide a merchant to dispute. So normally it's about like 12 to 14 days, but now they have given an extension of up to 30 days to do representment. And also they are encouraging a lot of their customers to go contactless payments. They are also encouraging their merchants actually to go contactless payment so that they can actually minimize the impact of COVID-19. And also Amex has made a policy to raise inquiries before they escalate to a dispute. So they understand that industries like entertainment, they give credit and they give actually extensions on the events that were canceled. So American Express don't want to blindly accept the dispute. So they're now giving the merchant the ability to respond on a soft inquiry stating what exactly happened. Have they given a credit to them? Have they refunded prior? So that's great because we don't want to face chargebacks. Chargebacks can be expensive. So Amex is providing merchants the ability to provide as much information as possible before they can escalate to a dispute. So when you get an inquiry from American Express, please do respond. If you do not respond to the inquiry, they will turn into chargeback automatically, which can be a lot more expensive for you. And last, with Discover, Discover has been closely monitoring the traffic. And as we all know, the percentage of transactions with Discover are very low, and they could have very less impact when compared to the other card networks. So as of now, they are closely monitoring it. They haven't made any official announcements on the programs they are actually introduced or the policies they have changed due to the COVID-19. So they remain as it is right now.
Thank you, Suresh. I know this is an oversimplification of the COVID economy here, Jeff, but would you mind walking us through some of these factors?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tyler, and hello, everyone. Yeah, we thought we'd start small here, but I think a reason we wanted to express these ideas is it's a good confirmation of things you may have heard at your business or just stuff you're hearing about on the news. And of course, throughout the presentation, we'll kind of add some data and anecdotes around this, but three main observations, which I think has been really interesting in these times. First, fraud is on the rise. As Suresh already eloquently put, there are certain verticals where this is expressing itself a lot more than others, but we are seeing a lot of inbound fraud interest as more merchants are becoming a little more omni-channel, right? Like there's kind of a necessity to force into more online payment methods or contactless methods, which may not have been a big share of wallet before. Secondly, consumers aren't buying as much. Where we see this line tend to divide is around what goods people might consider luxury versus essential. So of course, when you think about personal hygiene products, toilet paper, food, etc., like those things are going in droves. But perhaps, we talked about travel already. A vacation can be put off for a few months, jewelry, things like that. Maybe not where most of the dollars are being spent. And then third, of course, record high unemployment. While this is, has extreme economic consequences, we're also seeing that this does play a little bit into the fraud landscape as well. And fraudsters are kind of taking advantage of this. And we'll talk about that more in a second. What you're looking at here is some SIFT data. You can check this out on our website. It's just sift.com/COVID-19. But what we want to share is some insights that we've observed from the over 35,000 websites and applications we secure. What you're looking at in the blue line is event volume. So how you can think about events are transactions, logins, updates to account, posting content, etc., or more succinctly, just engagement on a merchant's website or application. Fraud rate, we're looking at disputes, of course, which Suresh is well versed in and is going to give us some good knowledge on later, but also other just pieces of content, logins, etc., that are also flagged as bad. So chargeback rates built in there, but there's also other types as fraud. Not surprisingly, our business was not immune to the times we are in. We certainly saw a market increase in March in activities, but also, unfortunately, fraud as well. So it's something that we needed to respond to. And Tyler, if I could get a click, please. In particular, we did some breakdowns by vertical as well. So when you look at travel and transportation on the left-hand side, at this screen capture, I think we were about a 3% fraud rate, but you can absolutely notice that huge spike in March and April, right? As a lot of cancellations and disputes were coming in. And on the right-hand side in financial services, you can kind of see one of the big peaks in event volume. When you think about what we were talking about with the economy and unemployment, we certainly saw a lot of attraction to people that were investing in Bitcoin for the first time or other financial services. It kind of circles back to the idea of, there's a little bit of disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street and the gains on the market. We definitely saw a lot more inbound interest there for people trying to find some economic help in really tough times. And Suresh, I know from the Chargeback Gurus side, you all have seen some interesting dispute information related to travel. Is that right?
Absolutely. Travel, entertainment, they have seen a big hit, especially during the COVID-19 situation. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
But
it's
we have some data that we can share pertaining to what the percentage looked before COVID and after COVID. We have slides that we can share.
excellent. If I could get one next slide, please. Other things that we also wanted to show from the SIFT side, again, on digital e-commerce, we're at this, again, screenshot, about a little over 3%, like 3.19% with that fraud rate. And a lot of this we've seen with, again, with shelter in place, certain restrictions going in, a lot more inbound interest for on-demand delivery, things of that nature. But also on the right-hand side, even though physical e-commerce plays in a little space, we're definitely seeing that omni-channel bend where you may be buying online and picking up in store. I recently saw a Domino's commercial where you could drive to a location, pop the trunk, and they'll put the pizza in there. So certain things like that, again, where there's still a physical component, still a purchase of those necessary goods, right? And then also, how is fraud mapping to those events as well? Next slide, please. And this becomes like an interesting breeding ground, as it were, for something that, for the sake of this presentation, we're calling COVID vultures. So fraudsters are always a bit advantageous by nature, and against, just human empathy, a lot of their work is done in times of struggle and real pain, and COVID is no exception here. So we wanted to walk you through a couple examples of things that we're seeing, and also some interesting data that's come out recently related to fraudsters' activities. So the next slide, what you're going to look at is actually the most up-to-date screenshot from the FTC and their COVID-related complaints. One thing that's interesting is when we first put this slide deck together, the number from start of June, excuse me, for the total fraud loss was just south of 50 million. So in just the last calendar month, that number has already jumped about $30 million in fraud loss. And I know, Suresh, you had kind of felt that Chargeback Gurus kind of saw a little bit of what we're seeing here from a categorical perspective as well.
Absolutely. We have seen travel and vacation getting affected a lot. And I reached out to one of the experts at FTC and asking them about how they are separating the online shopping. So when they report the online shopping, it also includes travel and vacation together. So that's why that number seemed to be very high. So that's a general broader category when they talk about online shopping. But what we do is we categorize by industry and we can go more granular. So what we have seen is the industries that are affected are entertainment and the travel industry, which are affected a lot by the COVID-19. They are the top two, followed by the gaming industry.
Excellent, thank you. And here is just some things that SIFT has observed as different types of fraud attempts that you may want to keep an eye out for or monitor within your own companies. On the right-hand side, it's a little lengthy quote, so apologies for that. But the reason I wanted to include it from Deloitte was, again, just a confirmation of something that we've been talking about that kind of explosion in online order growth, just within the period, but also like from a year-over-year basis. So the trend line, even though we're experiencing some pretty big peaks here at the moment, is still moving in that direction. So again, important things to consider when you're thinking about your fraud protection. Do I actually, monitor these channels appropriately is something to consider. And on the left-hand side with the bullets, some things we've seen are job listings, right? So we talked about that record high unemployment. So we're seeing a lot of scam listings around like, hey, we are now accepting remote workers. I know my former employer, Square, got a lot of buzz around that. making that a more permanent change. So there is a lot of newsworthy items around that. So a fraudster presenting a remote working option may seem more plausible to a legitimate job application at the moment, or applicant, excuse me. And they may interact with a fraudster more readily that way. Or there is more of that illegitimate side too, where you can kind of think of these as like traditional work from home scams around like, hey, I'm gonna ask you to reship some goods. I'm gonna have you, update these websites, things like that, where you may not have an appreciation for how you're getting paid as much as you are to do these goods. But again, in a time of like extreme economic stress, this may be something that's more attractive to legitimate users as something to pursue. On the second bullet, I know, Suresh, you had mentioned a pretty cool, or not cool, but an interesting anecdote around stimulus checks, something that you've observed.
Absolutely. I read articles where these fraudsters are actually creating fake websites saying, we are the third-party agency approved by the government. Please place your order and we will get your stimulus check. So they are not only asking for social security, they're also asking for credit card details, and they are targeting seniors because they are more vulnerable. And in some of the states, we have also heard news that telemarketing calls are being made targeting seniors, asking them to provide information over the phone where they can actually, facilitate stimulus checks. And that's a clear classic scenario of fraud. And consumers are being more vulnerable because of the current COVID-19. And there is a lot of talks about stimulus checks, but actually speaking, if a third party is approved by the government, then obviously they're going to release that information. But any other news coming from any other third party happens to be fake. And we also see a lot of data breaches happening because of the stimulus checks right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough environment. Just to kind of wrap up the slide, I know SIFT has definitely seen kind of a wave in hot items that were attractive for resale or fraudsters trying to attempt to procure them. The first was a lot of, again, those hygiene products we talked about, toilet paper, paper towel, etc. We're definitely seeing a lot in masks. So like medical supplies, you think, either suggesting they have like those N95s that, a lot of our healthcare workers desperately need, or just, some that have some level of efficacy. A lot of these can be knockoffs, which isn't great. Like there's a lot of press around 3M trying to limit the supply of counterfeit goods there. We're also seeing some pretty, again, ruthless stuff around availability to vaccinations and testing kits. While that still isn't widely available in all areas, you may get some fraudy listings and ads suggesting that, hey, for $100, and maybe they'll do like Suresh said, throw in some PII, we can get these goods to you. And lastly, we're definitely seeing a lot more interest from the fraud side on the e-commerce channels. So again, with more people at home, this is certainly something that fraudsters are trying to take advantage of and kind of ride that wave of interest. Again, it's a different scenario, but for me, it makes me think a lot about seasonality, especially around Q4 holidays, where there's a lot of good volume, but also fraud volume in there as well. Now, one thing that is really compounding this when you think about your traditional chargeback rate or dispute rate is a lot of businesses are suffering from less transactions, right? So when you think about travel, hospitality, etc., you may actually be working where you just have less orders coming through the door. So if an increased percentage of those are fraud attempts, it can really do some damage to your existing chargeback rates. And again, there is a brief pause in with some of the networks on how much they're enforcing their programs. But again, you expect that to pick up over time, and something that merchants need to get ahead of. Now, apologies for the meme. I'm a total meme dad joke kind of guy. But the reason I kind of included the Spider-Man meme here is just a visualization to kind of express a lot of those traditional fraud signals we would use to defend against fraudsters have a pretty interesting rationale for like just new customers to merchants now. So I included a few examples here, like, inconsistent billing and shipping address is a big one, right? A pretty plausible explanation for this from a legitimate customer is, hey, I do normally have my stuff shipped to New York. I'm in a billing address, but in New York, but I actually went to Pennsylvania where my family is, and that's where I'm sheltering. So that's where I need you to send my goods. A lot of that going on. And again, as a merchant, and you want to be empathetic, this is where you can feel a lot of pain around, like, how do I differentiate between a fraudster who's suggesting this and a legitimate customer that's really their life circumstance. We're also seeing a lot of this around just like the orders themselves. Again, like expedited shipping, kind of bulk or kind of hoarding type of purchase behavior. Again, something that may be atypical in a normal pre-COVID world. But again, legitimate customers may just say, I don't know when this will be back in stock. Can you please get this for me now? So again, it's really important to consider why legitimate use cases will be in here, why illegitimate ones will be as well. And then I think the challenge for us all, which we'll talk about soon, is how can you differentiate between these two instances and kind of give your best chance to fight that fraud, but still let good transactions through.
Thanks, Jeff. Suresh, I know that we handle thousands of chargeback cases a day. Can you tell us a little bit about the top reasons for true fraud and friendly fraud?
Absolutely. Even now, whether it is post-COVID or pre-COVID, we still see phishing emails and online scam seem to be the top contributor for true fraud. As you know, I talked about in the beginning, there is a lot of actually sites created that act like a government website, that act like actually products which are a necessity. We know that people were running out of hand sanitizer, so there was a huge spike in demand. So there were fake websites created, similar to the most popular websites, and telling people that they have the stock and they pretend to capture all the information. And also account takeover seemed to be the problem. And now that actually most of them are at home, the transaction volume has significantly increased in the gaming industry. And when people are purchasing an account, they tend to purchase a used account in eBay. So for example, these fraudsters load the credit card, they do an account takeover, they load the credit card for $400, $500. They sell the same account in eBay for $300 or $250, making it more attractive for gamers to buy those accounts. So account takeover is becoming extremely popular because gaming is one of the hot ticket item right now, especially during the COVID. And also the massive data breaches that has happened in the past. We talk about Experian, we talked about Target. These data breaches are still contributing to true fraud disputes even now, because there is a massive amount of credit card data that is being actually exposed in black market, and you can easily get a credit card detail with actually the CVV information, and you can use it anywhere online. So that's also actually a major contributing factor on the true fraud side. Well, on the interesting friendly fraud side, we have seen during the COVID-19, force majeure seemed to be a major contributor, especially in the travel industry and the entertainment industry. As we all know, airlines are unable to travel, especially international airlines, and we have seen a huge spike in disputes happening because they are unable to fulfill their requirement. Same goes true with entertainment and hotel industry. The challenge that comes here is Ticketmaster, and other platforms, they made a policy that they're going to actually give them a store credit versus issuing a refund. And some customers have a challenge. They don't want a store credit because they don't know if they're going to use the ticket again, and they wanted the money up front. And also, some of the airlines take more than 8 to 12 weeks to issue a refund. So this becomes very frustrating because not a lot of consumers can roll out the cash for 12 weeks when they're not using a service. So when they hear from the airlines, and some of the airlines are not even answering phone calls, they're saying it's all through email, consumers get very frustrated and they think reaching out to the issuers is going to be an easier method for them to get the money back. And now issuers are more tolerant, even more they were used to before, in accepting the disputes because of the COVID-19. And of course, we see buyer's remorse. This attributes to unemployment rate as well. Unemployment rate is very high. So with subscription billing services, we traditionally see a consumer, disputing maybe a 1 month of subscription or maybe 2 months. But now we are seeing 4 to 6 months. So the dispute ratio on a subscription billing is significantly higher right now. It's because when they, when they don't have money and when they lost the job, they're also waiting for, the unemployment check from the government, which we heard it's also getting delayed for several consumers. They think disputing the transactions is one way for them to get the money. So we see actually a lot of disputes happening due to buyer's remorse. And the third one, which is actually increasing right now, is lack of disaster planning. Merchants, most of them, I mean the small and medium-sized merchants, they were not planning for this disaster. They were not planning to handle this kind of call spike. They were not planning to handle the email spikes that's happening due to the COVID-19. As a result, they were unable to reach out to the consumers in less than 24 hours on an email or in less than 60 seconds on a phone calls. So whenever there is a call spike happening, whenever the emails are not responded on time, consumers think the easier method for them is to call their issuer because they are open 24/7, making it easy for the consumers to file a dispute. So these are the major 3 reasons that we see on the friendly fraud side.
And now, Suresh, I know that you've mentioned there were some industries that were more significantly hit than others. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've observed?
Yes, so this report talks about the chargeback percentage from December 2019 all the way to April 2020. And the first line chart, it talks about, the bar chart talks about across all industries combined. So if you look at the overall, even across all industries, the fraud percentage, the true fraud went from 6.7%, true fraud disputes went from 6.7% all the way to 10.2%. So that's close to actually 4% spike. But I would like to move the attention towards the the gaming industry. If you look at it, last year they were at 10%. This is across our internal data. And now after the COVID, especially in March as well as in April, they are at 18%. So there was an 8% jump in true fraud. And we talked about, there is a huge spike in gaming activity due to the COVID-19 because people are at home. They would like to keep themselves entertained by playing all these games, and then they buy, account takeover, takeovers, and then we see a spike there as well. Travel industry, we have seen a spike from 7% to 12%. On the entertainment industry, we have seen a spike from 8.6% all the way to 17%. And we know when an event gets canceled, people want their money back, and if the platform is not able to answer their calls on time, or they say they can only give a store credit, then that becomes a challenge. And we are seeing a lot of spike in entertainment industry as well. And on the hotel side, we see about it started at 7.3 by the end of the year, and then right now it's currently close to 12%. So you see the industries which are widely affected are the entertainment, the travel, and the gaming, followed by the hotel industry. And also we have seen a spike on true fraud across all industries by 4%.
Thanks, Suresh. Those are really interesting stats on the true fraud. Can you tell us a little bit about the friendly fraud growth that you've seen?
Absolutely. So friendly fraud in general is also on the rise. It's because now more and more consumers are well aware of their rights to file a dispute. It's not like in 2012 or 2010 where we had very few consumers who were aware of the dispute rights. But now the issuers, when they are issuing credit card, they are making it a policy to convey to the convey to the cardholder that they can file a dispute in case they see any transaction. They use it as a selling point. So consumers are well aware of their rights, and that also attracts bad players. So we have actually consumers who deliberately make an attempt to defraud the merchant. They learn about all these scam tactics in Twitter, Facebook. There are groups available where they brag about how they were able to get the product and the money, at the expense of merchant. And we have seen an increase from 68. It started like on an overall chargeback distribution, about 68% contributes to friendly fraud. and the rest contributed to true fraud and merchant error. But now we are seeing almost in 2020, 2020 is the worst because of the COVID-19, it's reaching close to 79.1%. So it's extremely high, it's on the rise. And I think Jeff covered in detail about what are all some of the factors which are contributing to it. The unemployment rate, and then the fraud is on the rise. These are the factors actually that are heavily contributing to rise in friendly fraud disputes.
Thanks, Suresh. So one of the, I guess, what some of the most common questions that we get are like, A, what can I do to help my company, to keep it safe? And then another question we get a lot is like, am I going to see huge drop-offs if I add friction, and what do I do about it? And so, Jeff, do you mind touching on that first point here for us?
Yeah, absolutely. In the left-hand blue box, this is some recent data that SIFT shared from its global network. And what we noticed is that actually the majority of the online fraud that we're now seeing involves mobile devices. So when you think about traditional fraudsters, I think you kind of have that image of like, a hooded person in front of a keyboard, and there's kind of like a matrix screensaver going on behind them. Maybe not so much the case anymore, but really I think again it's following where the trends are going and trying to swim in the wake of a lot of legitimate customers. So again, when you think about on-demand applications, delivery, more services going mobile and mobile first, we're definitely seeing that on the fraud side as well. So a lot of what we're trying to tell our customers, and also just anyone who will listen, is that it becomes increasingly important to be able to differentiate between fraud that happens on a mobile device versus that on web. And again, having different fraud insights and characteristics to help you tease out fraud patterns there. Again, for things that are on a device, which wouldn't be present on like your laptop, for example, would be like accelerometer data, GPS, things like that, where you can kind of take advantage of that and like carrier data to kind of better inform your decisions. Now, Suresh, I know you can educate us a little bit about dispute intelligence and the like here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So Chargeback Gurus' philosophy is before you work out a solution or a strategy, know your problem. And we want to identify the root causes of your chargebacks before we can actually make any recommendations. Because when we know the root causes, meaning if a chargeback is happening due to your customer service, if a chargeback is happening because of your fulfillment center, if a chargeback is arising because you have a bad traffic, then these are actually some of the areas that you need to address. And you can address it without a tool. You just need to make some business changes, process changes, and you will be able to see a significant reduction in chargebacks. And also when a chargeback comes in, we actually analyze the true fraud, the friendly fraud, and the merchant error categories. And when there is a high number of true fraud chargebacks, of course, SIFT does an amazing job in preventing the true fraud chargeback. So we recommend merchants to use, fraud prevention tool to eliminate some of the fraudulent transactions from getting into your system. But anything to do with a friendly fraud, anything to do with actually a merchant error, then obviously, we have a simple way to minimize them. And only through dispute intelligence, whether you use a third-party tool or use an in-house tool, you need to first understand why these chargebacks are originating, because every chargeback tells a story. And if you listen to that story carefully, you have an opportunity to fix the problem, and you also have an opportunity to retain the customers long-term. And also, it's our belief that for every customer that is filing a dispute, there are 4 or 5 more customers who have not reached out to you, but they have taken their business elsewhere because they don't have the time to file the dispute. So by listening to your chargebacks, by fixing your internal processes, and by having a dispute intelligence tool, you have an opportunity to organically lower your chargebacks by up to 10%. And we also actually seen merchants who are more more open to actually using 3D Secure 2.0. There were few merchants who said they saw some friction, but 3D Secure has come a long way right now. Some of the friction that was there earlier were eliminated by Visa, so the product is more stable right now. And we have seen a significant reduction in not authorized disputes when they start using 3D Secure 2.0. So if you have a lot of unauthorized or not authorized dispute claims coming to your network, we recommend actually 3D Secure because that's an excellent tool for you to minimize it, because now you are sending rich data to the issuer and they have the opportunity to verify the data. And if a data is being verified, then it prohibits the cardholder from filing a dispute saying they never authorized it. So again, inspect your recent codes, see if you are actually more vulnerable to not authorized disputes, and that's the case. It might be worth giving 3D Secure a try. The last program that is Order Insight, VMPA formerly, but now Order Insight. This is a great program. We have seen a deflection rate of up to 54%. I absolutely love this program because we are able to send rich data to the issuer, give them a lot more information they would traditionally have, and they can make an informed decision when a cardholder says they don't recognize it or they didn't approve it. So we have several merchants who are currently utilizing VMPI, and this program has been extremely beneficial in preventing some of the Visa disputes. And
Yeah.
these are actually the 4 programs we highly recommend for merchants who's having chargeback challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Suresh. Yeah, I was just going to add one quick comment. When Suresh was talking about knowing the difference between like true fraud versus friendly fraud, which Chargeback Gurus would absolutely help you get that intelligence, it actually becomes a really important part of your overall fraud strategy. Again, I know a lot of what we're trying to train on is that true fraud, right? To kind of get a better understanding there. But also, once you're able to differentiate these populations, treating how you assess and respond to fraud events differently becomes really important. So really, really good insights there.
So on that note, Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about how you guys have some really good graphics about the putting friction in place, and so could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have really enjoyed working in payments and in fraud prevention, but I think a lot of my historical struggles have been with my product managers that, they want to create these features, they want to do all these things. And then if I suggest some kind of security measure to ensure those experiences are safe and secure, I get a lot of resistance, I'll say, to be polite. And the reason is encapsulated here in this visual. So I think this is a lot of what the program managers see is, hey, we have some good users as represented by the bluish hue dots, but we also have fraudy users expressed by the red dots. And we're going to throw friction at every customer universally or every order universally. Some of these will pass, and then a lot of them will get blocked. And then there's a worry, like Suresh told us about, that silent majority, right? Someone that has this experience, and instead of going through with the process, they're actually just going to churn out or go to a competitor because they shouldn't have gotten this friction. So if I can get one click, a lot of what I would ask you to consider is the issue isn't the friction itself. Again, with 3DS, especially the 2.0 protocol, you can get a lot of benefits there, like the liability shift. If you do some sort of 2-factor authentication or identity verification, these are really great things to do to kind of trust but verify, as it were. But what I would encourage you to consider otherwise, or in parallel with that, excuse me, is how can we open up more gates for legitimate users to get through? And one more click, please. And then really target that friction on, the populations that really deserve that experience. So again, like a personal anecdote, I've used my personal banking with the same large bank for since I was in college. Every time I log in to check my balance or pay some bills, I'm served with the same challenge. And it's particularly frustrating for me because they can't figure out I am who I am. and it bothers the living heck out of me. These are things that we would not want you to do as your own businesses, right? So again, don't be scared of friction itself. However, what you do want to do is serve it to the right populations. So again, from a SIFT perspective, we try to do this a lot through the accuracy of our machine learning models. But another way, maybe a more human way you can think about that is if you're able to identify between good and bad users, good and bad transactions, good and bad logins, good gets good experiences or no friction or less friction based on your preference. The bad users should get as much friction as you want, and they need a much higher bar to clear to get access to your systems and hopefully prevent them from doing fraud.
Thanks, Jeff. Suresh, could you take a moment to explain a little bit about chargeback analytics to us?
Absolutely. Chargeback analytics are the gateway for you to understand your customers, because nowadays customers don't have the time or the inclination to provide a review, right? When you do something wrong, then they want to go and actually convey that to the public in Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. So chargebacks are a real way for you to know the good things about your business, the bad thing about your business, and not so great things about your business. So dispute intelligence, as we say, every chargeback tells a story. So you have a way to optimize your business by looking at dispute intelligence. So the first report that we very closely look at is what percentage of these chargebacks are turning into pre-arps, or what percentage comes in as retrieval request. Retrieval request is very, very crucial because you can eliminate a dispute by responding to a retrieval request. It's an inquiry that's made by the customer. They're not disputing it, but they just want to know what the transaction is for. By you just providing a copy of the invoice, you have a way to eliminate a dispute. A lot of merchants, actually, they just write it off as a cost of doing business. We highly recommend them not to write it off because the problem is going to keep increasing. So think about it. There is a fraudster who's making an attempt to defraud you, and it turns into a dispute. But if you don't dispute the transaction, then you are going to let the friendly fraud customer know that it's okay to actually defraud you. So by you actually responding back to them, you're sending them a message that you're taking this seriously. And also, we recommend merchants to blacklist some of their customers if they are known offenders. If a customer files a dispute based on a merchant error, that's totally understood. We don't have to blacklist them. We don't have to represent them. But that gives you an opportunity to fix your business process. But if a customer is actually defrauding the merchant and you have fulfilled all your obligation, then you need to either blacklist them or respond to the dispute so that you can protect your business. The next one that we look at is the fraud analysis, which is very, very crucial because we work with SIFT. We have a very tight integration with SIFT. So we feed this data back to SIFT because if the true fraud goes low, then we know that SIFT is working efficiently. If the true fraud is high, we feed the data back to SIFT so that they can optimize their settings so that it can actually find the sweet spot where we are just catching the fraudsters and we are not penalizing the good customers. So having this breakdown of true fraud, friendly fraud, and merchant error is very crucial. And merchant error always shows you why the dispute happened and which department created the issue and what you can do traditionally to prevent them. And we talked about 3D Secure. 3D Secure eliminates, a lot of not authorized disputes. So we also have analytics around 3D Secure for customers who are using it. So we are able to identify if 3D Secure is able to eliminate the dispute or not. Sometimes actually, if the transaction is 3D Secure verified, but the liability somehow by mistake was passed to the merchant, we just need to provide a copy of the 3D Secure verification data to win those disputes. So it is a really good analytics around 3D Secure, especially when a merchant is using 3D Secure. And the last report on the lower right-hand side is the refund analysis. Especially this happens during the COVID-19 where refund was issued, but for some reason it takes about like 8 to 10 business days for the consumer to see the refund, but this was never conveyed to the customer. So the customers think you're lying to them and they call their bank and file a dispute. So now you have issued a refund and you have also received a dispute, which is a double dipping in the industry. I know that Visa and MasterCard is working towards streamlining this so that the issuer can see it real time, but until that happens, we highly recommend merchants to send a follow-up email immediately after a refund was issued, outlining when they will be able to see the refund in their credit card statement, and also a confirmation that a refund was issued, so that there is no confusion with the customer.
Thanks, Suresh. And I know there's some instances where we might suggest that somebody not fight a chargeback. Could you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. So we recommend merchants to fight the illegitimate chargebacks. There is no reason for you to fight illegitimate chargeback. If you do that, then you're going to upset the customer, and they might actually potentially go online and actually say negative things about your business. So it is very crucial for you to know which ones to fight and which one not to fight. In this scenario, you see that actually the chargebacks was caused due to call center and fulfillment issue and a defective product. And when a merchant knows that they have about 50% of their disputes, or 30, 40%, whatever might be the number, happening because of their internal processes, they can actually fix the problem, and they can see these numbers trending down in the next 60 days. So having this not fought analysis, intelligence is definitely actually a great tool for you to know what your internal process issues are.
Thanks,
And the
Suresh.
next one I wanted to talk about is the traffic analysis. So merchants ask, why is it important to trace traffic? Several merchants right now are using Facebook, Instagram. They use affiliates actually to send them traffic. So whenever you use affiliates or social media sites for traffic, you also attract bad players. So you need to actually find out which traffic is actually supporting your business, which traffic is hurting your business. So when we are actually able to build the analytics around your traffic based on your disputes, you will be in a position to identify the best traffic and the bad traffic, and you can block the bad traffic from happening. And we have seen actually businesses making informed decisions after they look at the traffic analysis, because we also go granular by sub-affiliates and affiliates. So you can actually block the network or the individual affiliates who's damaging your business. And the last report is the customer contact, which is my favorite. We also actually track how many of these customers have reached out to the customer service team prior to a dispute. If a customer has made an attempt to reach out to you, it is your responsibility to fix the problem, especially during COVID-19. We recommend merchants not to be so rigid with their refund policy. If a customer calls you like on the 31st day or the 32nd day, don't be so rigid, because chances are they're gonna actually put a bad review online, or they're gonna call the issuer and file a dispute. So by being a little bit lenient, you will be in a position to actually eliminate the dispute. And not only that, please make sure you have experienced staff who has compassion and empathy, because a lot of people are out of job and they're looking for money, and also they want their call to be answered in less than 60 seconds. So make sure you're adequately staffed so that you can eliminate some of the disputes that happen due to your contact center.
Thanks, Suresh. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the webinar here. What can a company focus on if they have limited resources or a particularly small team? And Jeff, I'm going to toss this one to you for right now.
Thanks, Tyler. And yeah, I'll go pretty quickly. For those still with us, please do send questions along. Suresh and I would love to answer those. But quickly from the fraud prevention side, I think the first is now is a good time to revisit any rule sets or your machine learning modeling. A lot of what we've observed is merchants are still using logic that is a pre-COVID timeframe. So there's probably certain assumptions, limits, et cetera, built in there, which may not still apply. So you may be blocking more, having more false positives than you would care to do. I really liked how Suresh talked about this in a lack of disaster planning. I like to plan for the disaster after the disaster. It sounds really, not to be cavalier, but people are working in environments that they're not used to. There's a lot of struggles within it. Just plan to, if one more person is unable to work, you have to furlough hours and staggered schedules, get more stretched thin. Just have a few bullets on how you may want to address these issues, and then that'll give you a starting point to find a more substantive response. And then lastly, kind of honor the frustration and the pain you're feeling. Everyone has something at their job they don't enjoy doing. I think you'll feel that especially now in this moment. So if there are ways you can use that for internal stakeholders or your boss to get some kind of automation help, I think that'll serve you in the immediate term, but also long term as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Suresh, there's been some guidance for how to send out your refund policy during a transaction. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get to the questions?
Absolutely. So there are several industries where they have to update their refund policy, terms and conditions, and cancellation policy just for the COVID-19 situation. So it is very essential for merchants to keep your customers aware of these policies prior to purchase. Let them know your policies and your refund policy terms and conditions have changed after the COVID-19 or during the COVID-19, because you don't want the customer to be up for a surprise. Even your regular customers who are buying the products regularly, they're used to certain policies. And if you're changing the policy, make them aware of it, send them the refund policy after they have placed an order, or have them accept the terms and conditions prior to placing an order. And also, when you are actually disputing the transaction, it is very, very important that you have the copy of the terms and conditions or the cancellation policy as one of the compelling evidence, because issuers are looking for it right now. And it is your responsibility to make your customers fully aware of what qualifies for a refund, what doesn't qualify for a refund, and what qualifies for a store credit. And consumers have to agree to it prior to the dispute. You cannot, prior to the transaction. You cannot change your policy and expect all your customers who have placed an order before to comply with it. And if you do that, and if a dispute happens, then you will lose those cases by default. So it is very, very important you store all the transaction receipts. You email a copy of the receipt along with the policy so that your consumers are fully aware of it.
Thanks very much, Suresh. Okay, so we've had several questions come in during the course of the webinar. First, I do want to say yes, there is going to be a recording that goes out. So if you've been here, you're going to get this video later. The first question that came in though, Jeff, was how do you define physical e-commerce?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we do have to have some sort of bucketing around the verticals. So it's probably not a universal definition to give me some cover. But a lot of what we're doing for physical e-commerce, again, is that blend of kind of like an omni-channel transaction where there may be some component of digital, like initiating the order online but picking it up in store, or actually just a physical good in and of itself. So not like Suresh had talked about gaming, so like not a like crypto exchange or virtual currency, things like that. So we're kind of using both of those definitions commingled to get us that category.
That makes sense. Suresh, when you're talking about the gaming statistics, one question that we have here is, does that include online gaming? Like online gambling?
Yes, that includes online.
No,
yeah,
gambling.
It's online gambling.
Okay.
Yeah, the data that was shown is online gambling.
Okay, so in the instances where a merchant's unable to provide a refund, how do you feel about issuing store credit instead?
Well, it is up to the consumer to decide if they want to take a store credit or they want to take a refund. But during the transaction, if you mention that if the customer wants to cancel, they can only opt for a store credit and they have agreed to the terms, then of course the merchant can deny refund, but they can give a store credit. But if that was not conveyed prior to the purchase, then the consumer have the rights to choose which one they want to go for. One of the best ways of attracting the customers is giving them, if it is a $100 transaction, giving them a stored credit of, $150 or $125. So when they have actually more dollar amount as an incentive, they tend to actually take the stored credit versus the refund. But make sure you document it. If a customer agrees to go for a store credit, you need to send them an email confirmation and document it, because if they happen to file a dispute, you can use that as a compelling evidence to get your money back.
Thanks, Suresh. Um, okay, so Jeff, this one was directed at you. So this company is considering getting a guest checkout platform
Mhm.
for an e-commerce platform, and they were saying, what are your thoughts on a guest checkout potentially increasing fraudulent activity? Also, what is SIFT's position on reviewing these types of transactions with a workflow based on create order events?
Wow, that person has very specific SIFT knowledge, so kudos to you. Um, yeah, I think that's definitely something that's advisable to kind of untease that line of questioning. The way you can think about create order is SIFT looks at specific events through the user journey. The actual creation of an order is a really important one for us to consider. Other events might be like login or the transaction itself. With respect to guest checkout, yeah, I encourage everyone to have these types of flows. It's, again, I think the overreach is kind of something to the effect of you just want to capture any sale you can. So guest checkout can certainly enable you to do that. What I would encourage you to do is if you can log some kind of, either device intelligence, or if there's a contact email, a lot of merchants I see will still essentially create I don't want to say like a ghost account, but for their own records, they'll have some way to track activity within that profile, as it were, even though externally facing, it looks like a guest checkout to the customer. So it's still something that hopefully you can do some linkage analysis with, see what devices are related to this device or this login or this phone number, etc. So yeah, definitely having specific workflows and routes, really recommend. Also consider how you yourself are logging these sessions, and then also how can you use the benefit of those logs in the future.
Thanks, Jeff. Suresh, what suggestions do you have for banks or fintechs that are on the other end of this increase in disputes? This one's asking for any new strategies to prevent write-offs, especially for friendly fraud.
So when you say banks, are we talking about the issuers? Issuing banks? I believe they're talking about the issuing banks. So when it comes to actually issuers, the card networks have very clear policy that you need to ask the cardholder for specific information as to whether they have reached out to the merchant, because some of the issuers, they don't do that. They just accept the dispute because they want to satisfy the customer. We see most of the federal credit unions doing that. So asking that simple question if they have reached out to the merchant, because most of the merchants would rather give a refund than going through this complex dispute process. So asking them to call the merchant to resolve the issue, that would be a great step. And if they have already done it, then asking them questions about what was purchased, what is their specific, why are they initiating the dispute? Having those specific questions can also eliminate some of the friendly fraud customers from escalating to a dispute, because they all know right now that most of the issuers, they don't ask any question, they'll just escalate the dispute. So they think it's easy to file a dispute. So asking specific information about the transaction, about the reason for the dispute, or requesting them to reach out to the merchant first will go a long way. And I know that actually issuers right now can use VMPI, an order insight. So Visa has that platform that's readily available. You can utilize VMPI to capture rich data before you could even actually, escalate to a dispute. So that can be a tool for you to eliminate potentially, half of your disputes right now.
Thanks very much, Suresh. Okay, so we've got time for one more question here before the webinar ends. Can you guys tell us a little bit about what KPIs we might use if we're going to evaluate fraud prevention tools?
Yeah, I'll go really quickly, Suresh. I think things
Sure.
that are important to note are existing block rates. So how often, as like a percentile, like, or percentage, excuse me, not percentile, percentage, are you actually taking some kind of punitive action within the flow? Also, if you have some concept of manual review rate, how often do you tend to queue things up for review? What does that volume look like? And of course, dispute rate, which Suresh, I'm sure, can give us a lot more detail on. What's your win rate? If you have a blend of reason codes, things like that can be really important. But also, I find differentiating between, a fraud reason code and maybe a service-related one can be really important. And for any of these, I found it helpful to track them, either week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter, just so you can get some trend analysis going there too.
Well, that's a good point. I wanted to add one element to it. So some of the KPIs I recommend merchants to look at is your true fraud dispute ratio. Anytime across your entire chargeback portfolio, if you happen to have 10% or more of disputes occurring as true fraud, then definitely you need to use a fraud prevention tool. That's the indicator that you definitely need a tool. And in terms of actually measuring the KPIs, I will again refer back to your true fraud ratio. Once you start using the fraud prevention tool, how is your chargeback reflecting? Are you seeing more of true fraud or is it trending down? That's a good KPI to have before and after using a fraud prevention. And the last one that a lot of merchants would like to see is their false positive rate. How does their false positive rate looks like? Because sometimes when you don't when you don't optimize it properly, you might see an increase in false positive rate. But again, closely watch your false positive rates, and that is a good KPI to have as well.
Thanks very much, Suresh. And thank you, Jeff. I want to thank you both for helping us all out today. And I want to thank everybody who attended the webinar. I know everybody's got places they need to be, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Jeff, for putting together. And I wanted to thank all the audience for taking their time to listen to it. We hope that the information we presented was helpful. If you guys have any questions, you need to reach out to us. Please email win, W-I-N, @chargebackgurus.com. Again, it's W-I-N, win, @chargebackgurus.com. And whether it is for SIFT or for us, we'll be happy to escalate the questions to the right parties and we'll get your questions answered on time. Thank you.